chapter is on communication, and here we're not training you to be excellent communicators, because you need a different, you need a longer time to practice communicating effectively. But in this class, you will learn about the different mediums of communication, and more importantly, you learn about the problems that exist, the barriers that exist in communication. So by being aware of the barriers, you can, to some extent, improve your communication. So that's the purpose of learning this communication. Now, functions of communication. What is the functions of communication? The transference and understanding of meaning. So there are two key elements in communication. There's the transference and understanding. Two key elements. And there's a joke saying that if there's only transference but no understanding, we don't call that communication, we call that a lecture. Okay, just joking. Now, why do we communicate? Well, there are many reasons why we communicate. Right? To control member behavior, to motivate other people, to release your anger, perhaps, or whatever, to provide information. But if you were to ask why, like for example, to control member behavior, why? So that person does what you want them to do. Why? Ultimately, it's to feel good. And we communicate, basically, the highest reason why we communicate is to feel good. Even when we are releasing our anger, scolding somebody or shouting somebody, it is to feel good in the end. Okay? Sometimes giving information to others makes us feel good. Now, the communication process model, this is a useful model to understand what goes on in the communication process. The source is the person, sometimes we call it the sender. So in this class, in the lecture, I'm the source. And coding actually happens within the source. It's represented as a different box, but it's actually happening within the source. And coding is a process of translating, like, my thoughts into words. That's encoding, translating my thoughts into words. And then I'm speaking the words through a channel, through airwaves. You listen to it, and you are the receiver, you are doing a process of decoding. You're trying to make sense of what I'm saying. So decoding is done by the receiver, which is what. And then there's the feedback. And feedback is represented as one straight line here, but technically, you also have encoding, channel, and decoding here. So for example, the receiver, you don't understand what I'm saying, so you ask me a question. I hear it, and I try to make sense of your question. So it's an ongoing process.
So what is the decoding?
The decoding is trying to make sense of understanding what you are hearing or seeing. So in this lecture, you're obviously hearing my voice. What else is happening? You are seeing the slide. So there's also communication there. You're trying to make sense of what is in the slide.
Seeing the slides, is it channel or recording?
Seeing the slide, okay, the slide is, for example, I prepared a slide. I've done the process of encoding, and then the channel is the light, the light waves going through the air and bouncing into your eyes. That's the channel, and as it goes through your eyes to your brain, you are decoding the process as well. So you're decoding what I'm talking, and you're decoding what I have presented on the slide visually. So there's two kinds of communication. There's verbal, and there is visual, and there's also the body language, because I'm pointing here and there, so you're looking also at my body language. So three mediums of communication happening at the same time. So generally, the more methods you have simultaneously, the better the communication process is. So that's why now we are all going to multimedia and videos and stuff. Body language also, as I said here. So sometimes people might not ask me a question, but they are frowning. So that tells me that perhaps I need to explain it again. So that's and another thing that happened, what you can write on the slide here, is the word noise. Noise, N-O-I-S-E, noise. Noise is anything that interrupts the communication process. Right? So, for example, when I'm talking, there's a sound, a knocking sound like this. The sound is an obvious form of noise. We usually refer to noise as sound, right? But it can also be other things. For example, if there is a wind and it's putting the slide around, or it's flickering from the projector, that's also a form of noise. Visual noise, or somebody blocking the PowerPoint slides, that's also a form of noise. Yeah.
When we are decoding, we think of other things that also...
That's also kind of noise, yeah. Decoding here, or if I'm saying things which are absent-minded, that is happening here. So noise can happen if it happens in the receiver, it's decoding. It happens in the sender, then it's encoding. Yeah. So it can happen anyway. Channel, decoding, encoding, correct. So that's the communication process. So then you can understand. So similarly, like if a person just walks in, as we are conducting the class, somebody walks in the class very quietly, but it still can be a form of noise because I notice everyone looks at that person walking in. Okay, there are different kinds of communication, the advantages and disadvantages. Oral or verbal communication, advantages, speed and feedback. Disadvantages, distortion of the message. Written communication, advantage is tangible and verifiable. Disadvantage is time consuming and lacks feedback. So, that's why I think nowadays we are moving towards emails because it's tangible and verifiable. Although it's time consuming to type out an email, but if you are sending the same message to many people, then actually saves time. And then non-verbal communication, advantages, it supports other communications and provides observable expressions of emotions. The disadvantage, the chief disadvantage is that misperception or misinterpretation of body language. Because people of different cultures, they might have different body language. So be careful about using too much of the norm of interpreting another person's body language. Talking about intonations is the way that you say it. The same sentence can have a different meaning depending on which word you emphasize on. For example, why don't I take you, emphasizing the word you, to dinner tonight? You instead of somebody else. Or why don't I take you to dinner tonight instead of lunch? Now, dinner, in the Western context, if you invite somebody for dinner, it is slightly different meaning than inviting somebody else for lunch. Dinner is more intimate. So they're same word, but depending on where you emphasize, you have a totally different meaning. And that's the richness of verbal compared to written communication. The problem with written communication is you don't know where the person is intending to emphasize unless the person puts a bold lettering. If they don't put bold lettering, you don't know where the person is trying to emphasize. This one, never mind about the slide, you just delete it. Not useful for me. Grapevine is rumors. Rumors, R-U-M-O-U-R-S. It's like unofficial news. So grapevine characteristics not controlled by management, perceived by most employees as being more believable and reliable than formal communications, largely used to serve the self-interest of those who use it, and it results from these things. Desire for information, ambiguous conditions, and conditions that cause anxiety. But basically, you just open up your communication, and the rumors should reduce. I don't have to explain all this part, the slides are quite old. I don't think I need to explain to you what is email. Video conferencing, well, in the future we hope to go hybrid, that means part online, where there's a lecture conducted over the internet. What I have planned is probably posting some of my videos over the internet so that I don't have to be present in class, and neither do you. One day you can just watch my videos over your handphone, and you can be anywhere listening to my lecture.
So did you start doing the...
I'm preparing now. I'm getting the videos to hopefully do that one day when they ask you to do it, then it's all ready for you. Emoticons, well, you can do that now. They've got these yellow characters bouncing a lot more better now. Channel richness. Okay, now there are many ways of communicating. You can have video conferences face-to-face at one extreme to memos or letters or emails on the other extreme. What form or what mode of communication should you use? Well, first of all, recognize that different methods of communication have got different channel richness, meaning that the high channel richness, the amount of information that it can be transmitted during a communication episode. So face-to-face has got the highest channel richness. So that's why face-to-face lectures, to me, there is really no complete substitute for that. The next best thing is the video conferences or videos of the lecture to be posted up on the web. Because while you can see the slides, you can see the body language of the instructor, you can hear the voice of the instructor, and that's better than just hearing the voice or just looking at the written text. So low channel richness, electronic mail, you just see the text. And very important to notice the black line here and the words routine and not routine. So when something is routine, then you can send memos, letter, or probably now we don't do memos, letter, we do emails. When it's routine, you just send emails. But if it is a non-routine or perhaps what you write, sensitive, if it's a sensitive nature, then it's best to have a face-to-face meeting. Sensitive topics that are prone to misunderstanding, you should have a face-to-face conversation rather than emails. Especially when it comes to like performance, if you have to tell like someone did.
Interviews, they start with the memos, electronic mail.
Yeah, for example, if a person is not performing, your subordinate is not performing up to standard, then it's best to have a face-to-face interview to explain to that person, what exactly is specifically is not up to standard and how they can improve it, rather than just sending an email, which is probably very shocking and hurtful to people. Now, the next section, which is very important, is what I mentioned at the start of the chapter. By knowing about the barriers to effective communication and how to overcome them, you can, to some extent, improve your communication without having to attend. You can attend courses on public speaking and all that. But at least, by knowing these things, you can automatically improve your communication. So firstly, filtering. A sender's manipulation of information so that it will be seen more favorably by the receiver. Sometimes people only give partial information. Like for example, selling a car. People always tell about the good things. but they don't tell about the accident that they had, the problem they have starting in the morning. They don't tell that. So by filtering, the sender is actually manipulating, but what they actually do is filtering or cutting out certain information, the negative information, so that only the positive information is given and received more favorably by the receiver. That's filtering. So how to overcome that? And again, it happens in interviewing. How to overcome that? Like when you're doing an interviewing, when you are the interviewer, you have to be honest to tell about the good as well as the bad things in the organization. So that when the candidate accepts a job and starts work, they will not have a shock and they will not resign a week later. So you tell them the pros and cons. Okay? They call it a realistic job preview, which is telling the good bits as well as the negative bits of the organization and the job. That's filtering. Next one is selective. Next one is information overload. And imagine if this course, this entire course, all the lectures to be conducted in one evening. That would be a good example of information overload. I can do it. I can talk through all these 12 chapters one shot, but probably for most people, the amount of information flowing in, the inflow is exceeding the individual's processing capacity. Okay? So that's why we break it up over 2 classes over 6 weeks. And still sometimes say there is overload. Okay, next one is selective perception. People selectively interpret what they see on the basis of the interest, background, and experience attitudes. This is what, remember when we covered the chapter on perception? They filter out whatever, they see what they want to see, and they believe whatever they want to believe based on their experience and background. So the problem is this, if you are addressed, so that's why, you should get to know your audience before you deliver the speech. Before you deliver the speech, because be aware that certain kinds of people will have certain beliefs, and if you are saying something which is contrary to that belief, they will, at the best, they will block out whatever that you say. Worst thing, they might actually, have a verbal war with you, but at the very best, they might just block out whatever that you want to say to them. So be aware of their interest, the background, experience, and attitudes. And make sure to overcome their prejudices. Make sure to explain it in a way that is not against their beliefs. I remember that in one of the team building courses which I did, there was a firewalk seminar, which basically in a 3-day course, on the second night, participants will walk barefoot over hot coals. This was in Malaysia, and immediately one of them asked me the question that, isn't this against the Islamic religion? Does this involve witchcraft and all that? So I explained that it doesn't involve witchcraft. If anything, the Muslims have been practicing this even before the Hindus. In Malaysia, it was famous, Hindus do that. But I'm saying that if you do your research, it showed that even the Muslims, the Arabs, the Sufis, they've done this before the Hindus. And it's not tied to any witchcraft and all that kind of thing. Right. Next one is still on the barriers to effective communication, emotions. How a receiver feels at the time a message is received will influence how the message is interpreted. So if you notice, a lot of the leaders over here, they are very good in that they start with the positive. They say good things in order to make people more receptive to the plan that they are devising and the plan that they want people to implement. So make people in a positive mood. It's always good to make people in a positive mood rather than in a mood of anxiety, if you want to get their cooperation. Now, that's on the receiver part. Make the receivers feel happy, then you have a better chance of passing that message across. That's often done by people, marketing people, selling people. They make people happy first and then motivated, and then they sell the products. The next one is communication apprehension. Undue tension, anxiety about oral communication, written communication board. Now, this often happens on the sender part. If the sender is apprehensive, then they might mess out the words. But can it happen on the receiver side? It can also. If the receiver is still also apprehensive about the conversation, the receiver also can be affected. So communication apprehension, fear about the communication, it usually happens on the sender part, but it can also happen on the receiver part. Like for example, if you have to meet the king, then you are afraid. But most people are afraid, nervous. Language. Words have different meanings to different people, so be careful when you're using certain words, because in some societies it's considered rude to use a certain word. So always make sure that don't use slang words where in your culture it's okay, but in another culture it might be offensive. So be careful about that. And the final barrier is the gender barrier. The gender barrier is often can become a barrier to communication, especially intergender communication. Now, these bullet points are based on the book by Tannen, by the article by Tannen, and 2 years later, John Gray wrote a book called Men Are From Mars and Women From Venus, and it's got remarkable similarities to Tannen's article written 2 years earlier. So I'm not suggesting anything there. You make the conclusion. According to Tannen's article, generally, men talk to emphasize status, power, and independence, complain that women talk on and on, offer solutions whenever they are presented with a problem, and boast about their accomplishments. Whereas women talk to establish connection and intimacy, even when they're talking about the problems, the purpose is not to get a solution, but to establish connection and intimacy. I speak of problems to promote closeness, yeah. They criticize men for not listening. Actually, what is happening is men do listen, but the problem is that when men listen, they are offering solutions, whereas women want just to promote closeness. So the women interprets the men as not listening. And lastly, express regret and restore balance to conversation. They're very apologetic. So that's the general difference between two, according to the study by Tannen and written by the book by John Gray. Yeah. Yes.
What do you mean by promote closeness?
Promote closeness. They want to have a feeling of closeness to the other person. So the way to promote closeness is they like to talk about their problems, and work ideas. But it's not to burden the other person, but to promote closeness. But sometimes to a man, it's like burdensome, and that they have to come up with a solution. So that's why there's a possible miscommunication between the genders. And part of our research is to see whether it's true or not. And the final barrier to communication is culture, or between cultures, rather. Okay? Cultural barriers. And these can be caused by semantics. Semantics are meaning of words. Semantics are just meaning of words. Similar to word connotations. Word connotation is like the implied meaning of a certain word. And tone differences, like like you say, some cultures, they speak very loudly, not with the intention of being offensive, but it's their way, if you notice, like Chinese cultures, they speak with very harsh tone, and it's quite natural for them.
What means
Semantics are meaning of words. What's the meaning of words?
the same of
The
what?
word connotations survive in different cultures. Well, first of all, always assume that the other culture is different from yours. Because if you assume that it's similar, and then you say a word which is offensive, which is okay in your culture but offensive to the other culture, then you have problems. So assume that they're different until similarity is proven. Emphasize description rather than interpretation or evaluation. Rather than saying that person is rude, say the person speaks with a loud voice. Saying the person speaks with a loud voice is description. Saying the person is rude is an interpretation or evaluation. Practice empathy. Empathy is different from sympathy. Sympathy is feeling sorry for the other person. Empathy is knowing how the other person feels. Try to understand their culture, then you understand why they're behaving in that way. And treat your interpretations as a working hypothesis. That means like always, be open to correction and revision in the future. And that's it. That's all communication.